First, I just want to talk about 6 common myths that we believe that's not necessarily true. And this is particularly bothersome because it's not the things we know that hurt us. It's the things that we think we know just aren't rooted in truth or science that hurt us. And the reason why they're so hurtful is because we start to attach belief systems that can thwart our efforts in the future. So we hear them with enough repetition, enough emphaticism, and we start to believe, okay, yeah, this must be true. And if I'm applying something that I believe is true and it's not working, something's not wrong with the assumption. Something may be wrong with me. And what I want to do in this session is kind of create the construct that that's not exactly true. That whether something works or doesn't work, a lot of that is not around beliefs we have about it, the system and the research and the process we apply to bring it about. The first thing that I want to talk about is motivation drives habit formation or results. And the fact of the matter is motivation doesn't. All motivation simply means is it's a reason for doing something or behaving in a particular way. And this could be from an emotional state. This could be from a drive like hunger. This could be because we're interacting with a certain stimuli. It's fleeting. We might feel like doing something one day, but the next day we might not feel like doing it. So our behavior patterns become erratic. They become a little bit inconsistent. One thing that the research has determined is that behavior drives motivation. So it's the little things that we do that cause us to experience a feeling when we interpret what that behavior means. It's exactly the opposite. Second thing is education about the benefits of a habit support habit engagement. This is called knowledge induction. If people just knew and they understood the benefits of what they're trying to do, they would take action. Well, if that was the case, anti-smoking campaigns would be highly effective. There's been substantial amounts of research. One piece of research came out of Warwick University in England, and what it did is it took people who were moderate to heavy smokers and it showed them anti-smoking campaigns. And not anti-smoking campaigns like we have here in the United States, anti-smoking campaigns like they have in Canada, like they have in Australia, where there are graphic and quite honestly horrific images detailing the consequences of smoking. And they simply asked these 32 participants to determine how effective these anti-smoking campaigns were. All 32 of the participants said that it's very effective because whenever they would look at one of these images, they would feel either afraid or they would feel angry at themselves for doing this to their health, to their body, to their family. So when they put them in an fMRI machine, which is just a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, a brain scan, and showed them the same images, they expected a part of the brain that's responsible for fear and anger that processes those emotions, the amygdala, to be active. What the researchers found that was pretty surprising was that part of the brain, the amygdala, wasn't active at all. Here's what was even more surprising. There's a part of the reward pathway called the ventral striatum that was particularly active in all the participants. And what that showed is every time that they saw anti-smoking campaign, it increased their desire. The ventral striatum in the brain is responsible not just for reward, anticipation of reward. So seeing those images not only didn't deter people from smoking, increased their desire because it was linked to a habit. Another myth is it takes 21 days to form a habit. And that's just not true. There's no research to support that. So where that comes from is back in the 1960s, Dr. Maxwell Maltz wrote a groundbreaking book called Psychocybernetics. And it was one of the first of its kind. It was around the science of transformation and change. However, later research determined that habit formation can take 60 upwards of 90 days or longer. And the amount of importance and relevance and repetition all affect it. doesn't take 21 days. It's not that simple. So if people don't develop the habits that they want within 30 days, there's nothing wrong with them. It just takes a little bit longer to develop a habit. There are strategies that are well established that make that road a little bit more predictable and much more successful. Another myth is habit formation requires discipline. And if you take a look at discipline, you got to ask yourself, what is it? A lot of times when we think about discipline, we moralize. Well, discipline is a reflection of our character, and it's doing the things we don't want to do, because we're willing to put in the work. Some of this might be true, but basically, something in the chat. Let me see if I can answer this. Okay. All right. So just the original question. So in the beginning, while discipline does work, discipline like motivation is not a long-term strategy. We need something more, like our connection to value and relevance, and why am I engaging in this, and what's the meaning of this change, and how does it support habits? And after a while, the formation of a habit makes it automated. So white knuckling it and buckling down isn't nearly as effective as other things like having the right strategy and the right environment. Another myth is goal setting, determination versus environmental change. So identifying what prompts your behaviors and how to eliminate those prompts while creating new prompts or triggers or cues to help provoke desired behaviors that you're looking to create and habituate long term. The final thing that I want to talk about is immersive lifestyle change versus incremental change. Now, there is research that says there's validity to new year, new me. I'm just going to, starting on January 1st, even though I've had behaviors I have and the patterns I have, and I'm living in the environment that's produced these behaviors for several months, years, in some cases, decades, there's this magic date, and I'm going to change everything about myself. And usually when people do that, because they're making a lot of changes, they do see markedly greater results. What they don't tell you is there's a high level of relapse in these people, or recidivism. Research conducted by Scranton University just a few years ago, actually 2015, points out that out of everyone who sets a New Year's resolution around health and well-being and fitness, only 8% actually keep the resolution. I'm not talking about succeed in fulfilling it, even stick to it in the first place. Rather, when you take small incremental change, like I change one small thing, it can be much more effective because you know what's working, when it's working, and why it's working. If you change 5 things tomorrow and it works, you don't know what worked. What's worse than that is if you change 5 things tomorrow and something's not working, you can't identify what exactly needs to be changed within your strategy, and that could create frustration, overwhelm, that could create recidivism, that could create relapse, that could cause you to drop out and stop engaging in the behaviors that are about the outcome that are most important to you. And so let's talk a little bit about keystone habits. Charles Duhigg is the author of the book, The Power of Habit. And he says that small changes or habits that people introduce into their routines that unintentionally carry over into other aspects of their lives can be identified as a keystone habit. So here's what it means. Let's say somebody identifies that they're going to stop smoking. That's something they're serious about. They make sure that they don't buy a pack of cigarettes. They make sure that they get rid of all the prompts in their house, like an ashtray, or maybe when they sit down to watch a certain show, they light up. So they close up the cupboards and they put away the TV, and they stop smoking, and they're successful for a little while. Not only do they stop smoking and they feel good about not smoking, they start to notice over time that they have a little bit more energy. Not only do they have a little bit more energy, but other people notice they have more energy. Their mood starts to improve. So then they start to say to themselves, wow, I'm getting all these benefits from not smoking. I wonder what would happen if I started taking the stairs instead of the elevator. I wonder what would happen. I'd love to go for a walk in the morning. And then they start to notice that they feel even better. Over time, start to make dietary changes and eventually sleep changes. And before you know it, these little consecutive changes compound over time and produce an extraordinary result, taking them from where they started to where it is they want to be and beyond, because it all opened the door with one single keystone habit. So what we're going to talk about is process. No matter what has happened in the past, or no matter how many times somebody starts something and something goes wrong and they have to start again, that's part of the process. As a matter of fact, when things don't go right, if we can remove some of the emotion, understanding it's emotional when we want something, we commit to something, and we get disappointed. If we could step back and lean on our cycle, look at things with objectivity, rather than telling ourselves a story about what that lapse in behavior means, we start to learn about ourselves and how we interact within our environment. And those lessons give us the strategies to help us go further than we ever would have been capable of going had we not experienced a setback or a disappointment in the first place. So this cycle is based on 4 steps, and it's an acronym called Core Habit Cycle. I taught this habit cycle all over the world for multiple different companies. And I pulled what we know about habit formation. And I also pulled from cognitive behavior therapy. I've also pulled a little bit from motivational interviewing and a couple of scales to help us get really clear on what we want and where we are within the moment in relation to a behavior that we want to make habitual. So first letter of core is Q. A Q could be a trigger or something that prompts our behavior. O is an observation we're making about the behavior we say we want to initiate, ultimately perpetuate. R stands for ritual, and E stands for enforce. So let's take a look at Q. Again, these are triggers in our environment that influence behaviors. I'll take it from the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's say one of the things we want to stop doing, we need to stop doing, is sitting down in front of the TV. Not that the TV is bad, but the amount of hours we're spending in front of the TV could be utilized to engage in something else that's more aligned with what it is we want to be, have, and do. The problem is when we walk into our house, the first thing we see is the TV, the sofa. Those are environmental triggers that prompt an automatic response, which is sitting down, grabbing the remote, turning on the TV. If you don't really even need to think about it. How many times do we sit down and we're mindlessly engaged in something like flipping through social media posts, watching TV, or we just open the fridge out of habit, and whatever the food is there, whatever we see first, that becomes a prompt. So in order to do that, we have to eliminate those prompts create different triggers. On the other hand, let's say we decide we're going to go for a run for 20 minutes a day in the morning, 5 days a week. Let's leave the weekends out of it in this scenario. The first thing that you would do is create a cue. So you can leave your running shoes in front of the front door. So when you wake up, you can't leave your house without noticing the running shoes, and the running shoes remind you of your commitment. And a lot of times we can use certain semantics that rhyme keep us reminded of the cues. So in other words, we could say to ourselves, when I'm going to go for a run, 15 minutes or more, I will leave my running shoes right in front of the door. That's easy to remember. So it's kind of like a when-then scenario. When I go running, then I leave my shoes in front of the door. Next thing we're going to take a look at, and this is where a lot of habit cycles, although they have a ton of great information, they kind of fall short. If you think about the things that have become habitual, or the things that you really want to do, or the things that people will make excuses to do, you'll find that nobody really needs to motivate themselves or exercise discipline to get together and have a cup of tea or coffee with a friend that they deeply enjoy, nor should they. That's very good for your overall health and well-being. Socialization is a critical element of wellness. Notice you don't have to motivate yourself. That's the point. Or if there's a movie that you really want to see and it's starring your favorite actor, you don't have to motivate yourself. As a matter of fact, you'll rationalize and choose not to do certain things in order to be able to see that film, which means that relevance, importance, and enjoyment are all critical aspects of habit formation and the behaviors we engage in, or we don't engage in them, even when we know we might benefit from doing so. So a couple of questions in the observation is, okay, let's say I chose to go for a 20-minute run. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the greatest, how much do I anticipate I'm going to enjoy this? And you might think back about 10 years ago when you used to go for runs and the air was cool and crisp first thing in the morning and you felt amazing. And you might say, wow, it's going to be about an 8. Or you might remember that you tried out for the track team back when you were in school and you were the slowest person on the team in the tryouts. You didn't get picked and you hate running, actually. Now you're like, oh, it's going to be about, I don't know, about a 4 maybe? Well, when we run into this problem, there are ways of dealing with it. Because if something is really a drudgery before we even get started, what's the likelihood that we're going to engage in it with enthusiasm or engage in it long term? And the answer is, for most people, slim to none. Next thing is, how important is this in relation to my outcome goals and my vision? In other words, every time you embark on a behavior, you have a vision. Now, whether that vision is crystallized and clear, or whether it's a little bit vague or ambiguous, that's a different story. But we all have a vision. Like when somebody walks into a health club, or used to walk into a health club, say, oh, I really got to get in shape. And somebody would say, well, okay, what do you mean? What does that mean to you? And they say, oh, well, I have to lose 20 pounds. And they say, well, is there a time frame that's important? People go, 30 days. And the person sitting there will go, wow, 20 pounds in 30 days. That's very ambitious and highly unrealistic. Can I just ask why this is important now? And they say something like, I have a wedding coming up, I'm getting married, or I'm going away on a holiday, or I have a reunion. What that person's actually saying is, I just had this vision of what is going to happen, or what I perceive is going to happen if I don't lose this weight, and I don't like that vision of the future. Simultaneously, I have this dual vision of looking great and feeling great and showing up and seeing people I haven't seen in many years. I just want to experience that emotional consequence of that future possibility. So what's your vision for the future? What's your reason for even getting up and going for a run in the first place? And how important is this particular activity in doing it? And finally, how confident am I that I'm going to successfully follow through? If you think about the fact that, most of the other things I say I'm going to do, I pretty much follow through once I have a plan, you might be at an 8. If you think about all the times you said you were going to lose weight or start to exercise, and then, that snooze button was so tempting, you might say, well, I'm at about a level 3 or a 4. The question is, what exactly do you do in these situations? Well, let's start with the first one. How much do I anticipate I will enjoy doing this? It's about a 5. That's a fair bit of enjoyment. So it's not like I hate doing it. It's not like, wow, I hope I get to sleep tonight. I'm not sitting up and thinking about how excited I am to go for my run. Start to ask yourself, what are elements that are not necessarily related to running I also value, I enjoy doing them for their own sake, I can start to incorporate in this behavior. And let's say you imagine that, you know, if I were to listen to music, man, that would inspire me. That would take me up to about a 6. Well, what would take you to a 7? And you might think, well, I could, if I could listen to a storybook, I never really have enough time to sit down and do any joy reading. Or maybe you're someone who has a love of learning and you like reading nonfiction types of books that teach you something valuable and practical. Well, maybe I can listen to an audiobook and I can learn while I run. Or maybe I can elicit the help of someone who has also talked about starting to get in shape, and we can go for a run together. All of these things increase your anticipation that you are going to enjoy it. And you might even say, you know what? Maybe if I didn't run straight away, maybe if I went for a nice walk, I like walking. Because it doesn't matter where you start, any behavior can be built upon. This is what BJ Fogg refers to as tiny habits, and it's highly effective. Now, let's take a look at confidence. Anything less than a level 8 will reduce the size of your commitment. And this is the thing. A lot of times we'll read in magazines, we'll read online, on our social media feed, we have to do all or nothing. And we have to get into the gym a certain amount of times every single week, and we have to train at a certain intensity, at a certain frequency. And while this might be true in some context, again, you don't have to be great at something to get going. You have to get going at something if you're ever going to be great at it and experience benefits from it. So if you're at let's say a level 5 confidence, what if you didn't go for a run, you went for a walk? What if it wasn't 20 minutes, it was only 15? And what if it was 10 or 5 and reduce it down to the most ridiculous, where you're like, okay, there's no way I cannot do this, it's an 8. Because once you get to an 8, you'll establish a reference point and a reflection point you can build off of. So that becomes critically important. Next is ritual. This is the R in core. This is getting clear on not just what you're going to do, but when you're going to do it and how are you going to do it. One of the biggest things that hold people back, aside from selecting a behavior that's too big at first, need to go smaller, is they select something rather than being meaningful, specific, turns into a vague ambiguity. I'll give you an example. Oh, I wish I had more money. Well, there's no strategy there because there's no specificity there. How much more money? Why? What would you do with it? What value does that support? You can't even begin to start to plan around that. Or fitness industry's advice, eat less, move more. That has nothing actionable. So I'm going to go for a run every day. A lot of times starts out as a good intention. When it comes to execution, it fails. It fails because of lack of clarity. So, I'm sorry. There seems to be a little bit of background noise. If you could just scroll down, like move the cursor, there's a mute right there. Thank you. So what this element of core habit cycle does is it starts to create specificity, which makes execution easier and more adaptable. It increases the likelihood of follow through. So what am I going to do turns into at 6 a.m. every morning, I'm going to go for a run for 20 minutes. And I'm going to do that 5 days a week. That's a much clearer goal than I'm going to go for a run every day. And then enforce. The more we enforce a behavior with a reward, the faster, more effectively. It becomes a long-term habit. And just like brushing our teeth, we don't have to motivate ourselves to do it. It just becomes part of our daily routine. Here's a couple of things on reward. The more immediate the reward, the better, because it helps to link up that habit into a hardwired pattern in the brain. Second thing is it needs to be small. It can be something like after 20 minutes of a walk, I find myself right in front of my favorite coffee shop. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to savor a beautiful cup of coffee in the morning. After a while, I start to link the reward to the behavior. I look forward to doing it. Rewards don't have to be external. It could be internal. It could be stopping for a minute and saying, wow, I really did this. I've been meaning to start on something for months, something not the way. Today I did it. And taking note of gratitude, the intrinsic feeling that you get to experience because you follow through. Okay, let's break this down. You, what's your environmental trigger? Let's say again, your behavior is, I'm going to go for a run. The first thing you're going to ask yourself is, right, what is going to trigger the behavior? Our example, we said running shoes straight in front of the door. I would actually have to trip over these running shoes to leave my house. So I know I'm not going to miss them. Second is observation. So what's the enjoyment, importance, and confidence on a scale from 1 to 10? One great thing to do if you have a level 5 of enjoyment or a level 5 of confidence or a level 5 of importance is to ask yourself, why was it not level 2? And what that does is it quantifies the significance of the level of enjoyment or confidence or importance you're already assigning. It doesn't invalidate or establish a negative judgment. It just makes a constructive observation. Next, turn the behavior into a well-established ritual. Identify the what, the where, the when, and the how. So instead of, I'm going to start running every day, it turns into, I'm going to go for a run every morning at 6 a.m., Monday through Friday, along the river walk, if you happen to have a river walk. And I am going to run at an intensity where my breathing is labored, I'm still able to speak. On a scale from 1 to 10 of difficulty, it's going to be around a 6, let's say. And then what is your enforcer? What is the simple yet immediate reward you're going to give yourself to create eventually a well-established habit pattern that's in line with the outcome goals and the vision that's important for you? So here's an example of what I mean when I'm talking about starting small yet impactful. These are things that you can do, although they're not enormous in their level of commitment and they're not disruptive in your lifestyle. Every single one of these things are impactful and they're small enough that you can build upon them. So one idea could be, I'm going to add veggies to every meal. I'm going to eat everything I normally eat. I'm going to add more plants to it. I'm going to drink water before meals. I'm going to start using smaller plates. And that's an example of how instead of willpower, we can change our environment in order to change our behavior. In this case, portion consumption. I'm going to close all my TV and all devices 1 hour before bed, eliminate blue light. I'm going to help myself get higher quality of sleep. Maybe I'll join a book club, try something new every week, which helps keep your brain young and healthy, agile. Any one of these things you can start with. So let's take a look at add veggies to every meal. First one. Let's say I'm going to do this for at least 2 meals a day. It's not every meal. It's 2 meals a day. All I'll do is add veggies. If there's one meal where I happen to be out and I don't have as much control, keep on. 2 meals from 0 meals is a normal. I'm going to do this 7 days per week. I'm going to do that. Which 2 meals are you most likely to be able to make this change? Well, you know what? Breakfast, I'm home, and dinner. So those 2 meals, breakfast and dinner, is what I'm going to implement. Well, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you think you're going to enjoy this? Well, I don't really like vegetables. So only 3. Okay. Well, what would make you enjoy those veggies even more? What spices, what flavors would you need to add to that? What oils would you need to use? Healthy oils like olive oil. How can you bring this up to a 6 or a 7? Another thing is, how important is this? So if you were to add veggies to every meal 1 year from now, what would be impacted when you have more energy, you have greater cognition, your emotional state is enhanced? How would that affect your work? How would that affect you being perceived by other people? And how would that affect maybe other people in your house 30 days from now when they see you modeling the behavior that you wish they would engage in? So ask yourself some provocative, probing questions like that. Confidence. Again, so if it's like, oh, I'm about a 6, well, what if you didn't do it on the weekends? You just did it Monday through Friday. If you're still far from an 8, what if you did it 1 meal a day versus 2 meals a day? You get it. And how do you use reward? That might be the one day that you don't do it. It might be that you already see yourself as a conscientious eater and you remind yourself of that. It could be that when you sit down for a meal with your family, they see you doing that, and that makes you feel good because you're doing one small thing, not just for yourself. You're the type of person that does things for others. So that's kind of how you can go through core habit cycle. So when you take a look at changing behavior, let's look at 3 areas that really help us: emotional, cognitive, and modeling. The first set of questions deals with emotional. If you imagine yourself performing a behavior in the future, you don't even have to take action on it yet. Just imagine, how would it feel? How would it feel to be outside and feel invigorated and go for that run or go for that walk? What about after 30 days? How would you start to see yourself? Who would you be? It's different than how you see yourself now. Cognitive. If you were to do this behavior, what would be 2 to 3 most important tangible benefits? It could be, I would get my LDLs a little bit lower. I could get my blood pressure under control. I would have more energy and vitality. I wouldn't have that crash in the middle of the day where I literally have to drag my brain from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Modeling. Who do I know already doing that? Now, this could be someone you know or know of. It could be someone on social media. It could be someone on TV. It could be someone with your same last name that was in your household. What would this person do every day or most often? What would they not do most of the time? What are the behaviors they refrain from? And what's one behavior, just one, I can model off of them and engage in vicarious experience? And all of that helps support habitual behavior. So that's pretty much it. I just want to say thank you.